Got it. All right. Welcome. Bienvenidos. Thank you for joining this virtual meeting on resilient Raritan River and Bay communities. Just a quick note on translation services tonight. So for American Sign Language interpretation, we will pin our interpreter and we're going to drop in the chat some instructions for how to get to Spanish interpretation. So if everyone gets settled in, please take a moment to update your name by hovering over your name in the participant window. Click More and rename, provide your name and city. We're really excited to have everyone here tonight, and we value your time very much and are looking forward to your feedback to help guide the outcomes of the project. Next slide. So before we get started, we have some quick housekeeping items to take care of. So to ensure we limit background noise, we ask that everyone remain on mute when not speaking. We want to make sure that everyone is heard and also that we share important information with you. And that means that we've broken this meeting into two parts. A short presentation that should take about 30 minutes with plenty of time for Q&A. And then the rest of the time together is going to be in breakouts for discussion. Throughout the upfront presentation, we'll post questions to you for response in the chat. And you can also ask us questions in the chat. We'll respond to the questions either in the chat directly or at the end of the presentation before we move into the breakouts. And if there's any questions that we don't get to during the meeting, we will follow up with those responses after the meeting in the report out. We will spend most of our time together in the breakouts to ensure that your perspective is represented. So please stay for those. And the meeting is being recorded. The initial presentation is being live streamed, and we will post recordings to YouTube. We will also use the breakout recordings for the project team's purposes. So let's find out who is in the room tonight. Please respond in the chat. How do you experience the Raritan River and Bay region? Are you a resident of Carteret, Woodbridge, Perth Amboy, Sayreville, South Amboy, South River, or Old Bridge? Do you work in one of those cities? Are you a concerned neighbor or visitor? Do you represent a community or a civic group? And also let us know in the chat. Next slide. I think we're stuck. What should the Raritan River and Bay region look like in 2070? What kind of changes do you want to see over the course of the next 50 years? So this is our second community region-wide meeting. Our last meeting was in October. It was to introduce the overall project, its progress, talk about why it's important and how the plan can help the region build resilience and how you can stay connected and involved through the entire project. And if you're watching on Facebook Live and would like to join the Zoom meeting, you can join by going to the address on the screen, and that will enable you to also participate in the breakouts. We'll show this a couple times so that you don't miss it if you would like to join. So tonight, we'll be sharing more information about what we've learned about flood risk in this region through our work and how this risk is likely to change in the future due to climate change. We'll also share 3 divergent scenarios for how the region could adapt to flood risk and changing conditions over the course of the next 50 years. And we'll share the feedback with you that we've received so far on priorities that community members have expressed, and also how we're using that feedback to develop these scenarios and develop the plan. We'll also talk about next steps and how you can stay involved. Next slide. So we're hoping to get some important feedback that can help refine and advance the project. We want to know if there are key areas or specific places in your community that are at risk from flooding that you're most concerned about. We also want to know about additional issues beyond flooding that we should seek to address. When we're working to address flood risk, we often have an opportunity to improve quality of life in other ways. So we want to hear about the ways that you want to see. And finally, we want to hear from you about what types of actions you want to see implemented in your community and across the region to address flood risks. Next slide. So what would you like to hear tonight? What do you want to get out of the meeting? What do you hope to contribute? Let us know in the chat, and we'll keep that in mind as we move into the breakouts. And you can also be thinking about this while we're introducing the project team. Next slide. The Resilient New Jersey program is administered through the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. It includes initiatives in 4 pilot regions across the state. The Raritan River and Bay communities is one of those pilot regions. There's also Resilient Northeastern New Jersey, Long Beach Island, and Atlantic County coastal communities. Those are the other 3. Resilient Raritan River and Bay communities is a partnership between Middlesex County, Old Bridge, Woodbridge, Sayreville, South Amboy, South River, Carteret, and Perth Amboy. And representatives of each of these entities sit on the project steering committee in addition to YMCAs of Middlesex County. So we've developed a partnership with those community-based organizations to support and steer the program. The consultant team support consists of an interdisciplinary team of engineers, scientists, technology developers, planners from the organizations that are listed across the bottom. And the members of the consultant team will introduce themselves in the breakouts, but we're going to take a couple moments to introduce members of our steering committee tonight. And folks, as I call on you, please let us know your name and your role and organization. So I'll start with Emily Goldstein with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Carly. As Carly just said, my name is Emily Goldstein. I'm an environmental planner with the Bureau of Climate Resilience Planning with the Department of Environmental Protection, and we are the office that is in charge of administering this grant program, and I am the assistant project lead. Very excited to see you all tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Emily. And I think we have Steve from the YMCA. Steve, would you like to introduce your team members from the YMCAs?
Hey, Carly, how are you? Sorry, I'm just hopping on. Good to see you guys. Steve Jobin from the Raritan Bay Area YMCA in Perth Amboy.
Thanks, Steve. Anybody else from your team that you'd like to introduce tonight? I see we've got Chris from the Old Bridge YMCA.
Well, hi,
I'm
this
here.
is Lauren. I'm from the Y with Steve, and we got definitely some other Y folks on.
Yeah, I'm Chris Nesta. I'm the executive director at the Old Bridge Family YMCA.
Nice to have you, Chris.
Marianne Lawrence, also from Raritan Bay Area YMCA.
Thank you for joining, Marianne. Anybody else from the YMCAs? I'm having a hard time seeing all the names, so I apologize.
Hi, Brenda Crespo with the Raritan Bay Area YMCA.
Great, thank you. Okay. All right, and so we also have members from our municipalities and our steering committees on the line. I saw Mike Sika from Carteret. Would you like to introduce yourself, Mike, and anyone else from Carteret?
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Sika. I'm the Chief of Staff to Mayor Dan Ryman. We also have on the line, although he had a call-in, John Slonis, our Director of Communications.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I see Damian Gill from Old Bridge. Damian, would you like to introduce yourself and other members of the Old Bridge team?
No problem. Good evening, everybody. Damian Gill, I'm the zoning officer and floodplain manager for Old Bridge Township. Venus Sawant, I think maybe on the call, but she was gonna have to leave a little bit early. She's the township planner and she usually sits with us at steering committee meetings as well. And we're representative for Old Bridge Township.
Great, thank you. And I see Kirk Mick from Sayreville. Kirk, would you like to introduce yourself and anyone else from the Sayreville team? Okay, I'll move to Art Lindensky with South River. Hi, Art. You're on mute.
Good evening. I'm Art Lindensky, the Borough Administrator in South River. Hope to have some people from our Environmental Commission on, possibly some council people.
Great. Would you like to introduce them, Art?
I don't know who's on yet.
Oh, okay. All right. Gotcha. We've also got several representatives from Middlesex County on the line. I see Lakeisha Carter. I know, Lakeisha, you said you're having some volume issues. So Lori Sobel, would you like to introduce yourself and John and others from the county?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Lori Sobel, Supervising Planner of Sustainability and Resiliency with the Middlesex County Office of Planning.
John Ferguson.
Hi, Carly. I'm John Ferguson. I'm the Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator for Middlesex County.
Great. And John, is there anyone else from the county that I'm missing?
Hi, Carly. Brady Smith,
Yes,
Senior
Brady.
Planner. Hi, how are you? Senior Planner with the Office of Planning. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Brady, and my apologies.
Oh, quite all right.
Is there anyone else from the steering committee that I missed?
Hi, a few folks on
Valley YMCA.
birthday and boy.
You also on Tashi Vasquez, Office of Economic and Community Development, Perth Amboy.
Great. And
Larry
Larry
Catano.
Catano.
Yes, I'm sorry, Larry, Perth Amboy OEM, having some technical difficulties here. Thank you.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Really great representation from our steering committee tonight. And I think that sort of highlights the importance of this project to the region and its breadth and our efforts to engage as many different parts of the community as possible, having the YMCAs on board. So before I shift it over to Mary Kimball, who's going to dive into the project itself, we're just going to take a moment to switch interpreters.
Cambiar de intérpretes.
Okay, great. We're ready. All right, Mary Kimball, you want to take us away? And I'm Carly Foster. I forgot to mention that.
Great, thank you, Carly. Mary Kimball, I'm the planning lead for the Resilient New Jersey program on the Arcadis team. So I'll walk through an overview of the project and a little bit of a preview of some of the information that we'll be diving into more deeply in the breakout sessions. So as Carly mentioned, this project covers these 7 municipalities within Middlesex County, and the focus really is on developing a regional resilience action plan to address the flood-related hazards that the area faces. And critically important are events like this, that as part of the program, a big emphasis is making sure that input from the people who live, work, and play in the region are really embedded into the planning process from the beginning and throughout. So to give you a sense of, what we mean by this plan, what types of things that this plan could include, there's really a wide variety of what could come out of this process. It could include, the proposals for physical projects, nature-based solutions like wetland restoration, as well as flood protection of critical assets. Also, a result of this plan could be recommended changes to policies and ordinances or governance structures, such as incentives for green roofs or higher standards for new development. And another outcome could also be the development of outreach, education, and capacity building tools. This could include educational or outreach campaigns. It could also include, more specific guidance and outreach materials, such as for homeowners on flood mitigation and insurance. So really just to give an example of the types of things that could come out of this process. And this diagram is explaining how we'll get there. What is our overall process? So the feedback that you're providing today will be a big part of this. It'll help us to refine our understanding of that regional vision with shared priorities. Also, by sharing your understanding of the on-the-ground experience of flood risk will help us understand and dive deeper into our analysis of flood risk. And also in terms of identifying preferred tools to reduce risk, that'll help us to develop or inform the development of the resilient scenarios that we're developing that is based off of this regional vision, addressing the risk, and also a combination of these tools. Once we develop these resilient scenarios, we will then be refining and developing a preferred scenario based off of feedback through events like this. And then that preferred scenario will be the basis of the action plan. So the project kicked off publicly last spring, and we held our first community meeting in October, really focused on that, what is a shared regional vision? Since then, we've advanced our analysis on flood risk and hazards, and we'll be sharing some of those results with you today. We've also been in the process of identifying relevant tools to reduce flood risk and developing resilient scenarios. And we'll be walking through those scenarios later today for your feedback. Then we'll be coming back later in the spring with the preferred scenario and a draft action plan. And throughout this, we're also, in addition to hosting these large regional public meetings, we've also started to do, and we'll do more small group meeting and workshops to get additional feedback. So this program is focused on flooding, but from all kinds and multiple sources. It includes looking at rainfall flooding or flooding that happens from heavy rain events in low-lying areas and when rain overwhelms drainage infrastructure. We're also looking at tidal flooding, and this is when high tides overtop and flood low-lying coastal areas, something that's not a huge issue today, but will be with sea level rise. And we're also looking at coastal storms and storm surge, how increasing water levels in the ocean can cause flooding of coastal areas and also coastal erosion. And we're also looking at riverine flooding, the type of flooding when heavy rainfalls makes rivers overflow. And you may be saying, why do we care what are the different types of flooding are? I just care if it floods. But when we develop solutions and strategies to address this flooding, it's important for us to understand, what is that root cause so we can be addressing that cause of flooding. So in this program, we're not just looking at current flood risks, but also how those risks will change in the future. In New Jersey, we expect to see 2.4 feet of sea level rise by 2070 and an increase in rainfall intensity of 10%. This will means that sea level rise will be, sea levels in general will be higher on a daily basis. And then when a coastal storm comes in, it means that the storm will reach further inland and with higher flood depths. And this increased precipitation means more flooding in urban areas and increased overflowing of rivers. So as part of this program, the state has developed some new regional models for looking at both current and future flooding. This map here shows how the region is affected by a heavy rainfall event, such as what we experienced over the summer with Ida. You can see that there's really pockets of flooding, across the whole region, but much of it is concentrated along waterways and tributaries like Woodbridge Creek, the South Branch of the Rahway River, Pumpkin Patch Brook, Raritan River, and then also South River and the tributaries, and Chesquick Creek. And this map is showing what would happen if a storm like Sandy, which was really primarily more of a coastal storm surge event, not a big rain event, what that would look like in 2070 with that 2.4 feet of sea level rise. And you can see that it largely affects the low-lying areas along the coasts of the Arthur Kill, the Raritan River and Bay, but also those tidally influenced waterways through Woodbridge and Old Bridge, and also along the South River. And finally, this map here, this shows what daily high tide would look like in 2070 with sea level rise. You can see that it's a little more limited than the other ones that we were looking at. Most of the areas affected are also wetlands, although there are some developed areas within South River and Sayreville that are affected. And while the flooding in these areas, it wouldn't really be as deep or extensive as some of the other flooding that we were looking at, but you have to remember that this would be on a daily basis. So something that would happen every day and be very disruptive to daily activities and quality of life. So in addition to that flood risk and these new maps that we want to share with you today, the other focus of today is really focusing on scenarios. Also, I should say that I know these maps are at a big regional level, but in the breakouts we'll be able to dive in more specifically and look at key areas of concern. So as part of the Resilient New Jersey program, we're developing scenarios for how the region could be reshaped in the future to reduce flood risks. And really the goal of this is to allow stakeholders, people like everyone on the call here today, to really understand what are various pathways, what are potentially divergent pathways, and what could be the trade-offs of different approaches. And the idea is that this is a helpful exercise to go through in terms of developing the preferred pathway. So for this process, we've developed 3 distinct regional scenarios, all geared towards 2070 as the year. And these have been based off of discussions that we've had so far, also our analysis of risk and the development of those potential tools. And each scenario, as you'll see, has a common theme that's comprised of a range of keystone actions or individual projects or strategies to address flood risk. And we'll compare each scenario to the existing conditions or the baseline scenario in order to look at the flood mitigation benefits. And we'll also look at a range of other evaluation criteria to ensure consistency with the project vision and its objectives. Then we'll develop a preferred scenario that's based off this evaluation. The preferred scenario, it could also really be kind of a hybrid of these 3 approaches, if that's what makes the most sense. And we'll come back to you in the spring to show you the results of that. And the starting place for all these scenarios really came from this working vision, this vision statement that the steering committee developed that really kind of highlight the need to think at a watershed scale, to focus on flood risk reduction and resiliency, but also to consider environmental restoration, economic growth, and broader social benefits. So now I'll turn it over to Sarah from SCAPE to talk through the scenarios.
Thanks, Marian. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Tolgai, also part of the consultant team and the senior designer and planner with SCAPE, specializing in resiliency and nature-based solutions as well. So here we actually are showing you kind of a summary of the 3 scenarios, what we have in mind based on everything that we've heard from you over the past year, both through the public meetings, small workshops, and ongoing meetings with the steering committee. And the 3 scenarios really take a different approach to flood risk reduction. The first one is really about protecting critical assets and economic centers in the region. So some of the examples we see already is these flood walls that are protecting the Sayreville pump station and the the adaptation of the NJ Transit Raritan River Bridge that's currently sort of ongoing. The second scenario focuses on restoring natural systems and minimizing exposure. And there are great examples from the region that kind of embody this idea. One is the No Street street park that uses open space to really manage stormwater after Hurricane Sandy, or the Woodbridge waterfront park that's transitioning a brownfield to a wetland, and a great sort of recreational asset for the community. And then the third scenario does combine elements of these two, but really focuses on transitioning to smart growth for a new economy. So some examples we've seen, for example, the Transit Village initiative really concentrating development around transit and really at higher elevations away from risk. And then we have other examples from around the world where we see adaptive reuse of industrial shorelines, either as cultural institutions or new economic centers. We can go to the next slide. So to recap, how do these scenarios put a different emphasis on addressing flood risk? The first one really is geared towards protecting critical infrastructure assets and developed areas in place, and really utilizing sort of infrastructure and barrier strategies to protect these substantially built up waterfront areas or vulnerable areas. The second scenario really looks at ecological benefits and natural systems to minimize exposure and also plan for a less vulnerable development in the future. And the third scenario is looking at economic opportunities in conjunction with climate adaptation. So protecting critical assets while directing growth to areas that are less vulnerable. And we can go to the next scenario and really look at some example keystone actions for each. So here you see a draft, but a graphic representation of the first scenario. It is a work in progress and that we'd like to discuss with you today. But some of the high-level keystone actions that really represent this scenario is the site-specific adaptation of critical utilities, such as wastewater treatment plants or power generation facilities. The second sort of high-level keystone action is to identify areas that really need shoreline barrier strategies to protect waterfront areas. And the third one is really the development of guidelines to integrate flood risk mitigation and stormwater management into new development. You can go to the next slide. And this scenario, sort of when we talk about restoring natural systems, we really need to look at the tidal, wetlands, and riparian zones throughout the region that really provides both ecological benefits and can help reduce flood risk. This also includes the use of open spaces for stormwater management, like the example we saw in Carteret, and also the transition of really highly vulnerable brownfield sites and industrial areas to open space. You can go to the next slide. And lastly, in this scenario, in addition to kind of some of these keystone actions I mentioned, this scenario looks at transitioning some of the land uses, vulnerable land uses away from such industries such as oil and gas that are at risk on the coastline, and also strengthening developed areas outside of the floodplain. So those especially that are close to transit systems and commuter rail. So this includes enhancing resiliency of mobility systems in the region as well that would really support the success of this scenario. So we can go to the next slide, and I believe, Mary, I'll pass it on to you to go into more detail, the breakout sessions and how we'll really be looking at these scenarios in more detail together.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So in our breakouts tonight, we'll be able to go into more detail into some of those flood maps that I showed and zoom into specific areas of interest. And then we'll also share some of what we've heard so far in our outreach about key concerns and priorities of future, really even outside of flood risk, and see if there's anything to add to that or how to refine that. And then we'll also zoom into these 6 specific neighborhoods that are shown here as really kind of examples of areas to walk through how they would be treated differently under the 3 scenarios. And these 6 areas were chosen because they are areas that have come up as areas of flooding concern and flood risk, but also because they represent a range of different conditions, from a more urban area to a less urban area, also sort of the differences in terms of inland and riverine flooding versus more coastal flooding. So by kind of getting input in these 6 scenarios, we're also hoping to get input into the scenarios at a more regional scale too. And in terms of what what sort of discussion questions we're asking for in these breakout sessions, we want to get your input on, based off of these flood maps, what are places that come out to you as sort of, highlights or areas that you're particularly concerned about? What are additional issues, that we haven't mentioned that we should be seeking to address in addition to flood risk? What types of flood risk mitigation actions? And, we'll talk about some that could work in these areas, which out of those options are the most desirable. And then, more broadly, I think we want to hear about things that you want to see tomorrow and, sort of near immediate actions, but we also want to be thinking long-term with this project and really get everyone thinking about, what do we really want to see in the region in 50 years? What should it look like in 2070? So we'll have 5 different breakout groups. You should be able to identify or choose your own breakouts once we launch this within Zoom. If you want to if you want to do the very first region, you should just stay in this main room, so not choose one of the breakout groups. And in this room, we'll be focusing on the region, and the ASL translators will be staying here too. The second room will be in Spanish, and then the rest of the rooms are divided geographically. So Woodbridge and Carteret, Perth Amboy and South Amboy, and finally Sayreville, South River, and Old Bridge. All right, so the breakout groups are open now. Let us know any technical difficulties or questions in jumping in.
Hi, this is John Solanas. I'm the communications director from Carteret. I'm trying to join a group, but I'm only on my cell phone. I called in, I'm not on Zoom. Is there a way for me to join the group?
I believe I can assign you to a group if you have a preference. Is there a particular group you wanted to join?
Yeah, I'd like to be in the Carteret group, whatever the Carteret.
Is there anyone else in the regional group who needs assistance getting into a breakout group?
Yes, actually me. I'm Brenda Crespo. I'd like to be in group number 4, the Perth Amboy and South Amboy group.
Sure, I'll add you right now.
Hello, this is Daniel DiArci. Can you put me in Woodbridge, please?
Sure.
And it's Larry Catana. I'm getting into group 4.
Group 4, so that is
Perth Amboy group.
Got you.
Sergeant Lendensky, group 5, please.
Sorry, could you repeat your name again? Oh, Arthur Ledinsky. Okay, I see you now. Group 5.
Did I understand it right that staying here is a regional group, or do I have to go to a breakout room?
That's right. Staying here is the regional group. We'll get started
Okay.
here just as soon as everyone's sorted out.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, great. Okay. So is everyone who's here meant to be in the regional group? Anyone trying to go to any other group still? All right. Well, great. So first, I'd love to get a sense of kind of who's joined this group, and particularly since, we are focused at, the scale of the region. If there's areas of particular concern that you want to cover and want to zoom into, that'd be great to know. So we can go around and introduce yourselves again. I'm Mary from the Arcadis team. And I may just choose people so that we can get through this, but actually, I'll first ask my my note taker and co-facilitator, Ellie, to introduce herself too.
Hi, I'm Ellie. I also work at Arcadis as a water research engineer.
Great. And Brady, do you want to introduce yourself again?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Brady Smith, the senior planner with Middlesex County Office of Planning.
Emily from NJDP.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Emily Goldstein with NJTDP. I'm an environmental planner and I am the project lead for RNJ. So excited to see you all.
And I see we have John Ferguson and Lakeisha from the county as well.
Yep, I'm still here. John Ferguson. Thanks.
Hi, I'm here. Lakeisha Carter, Middlesex County Community Services.
Great. And Laura Kerr, where are you from? Maybe Laura. Oh.
Hi, I'm sorry. It took me a while to find my thing. I'm
No worries.
Stevens Institute of Technology and New Jersey Sea Grant, and I'm really just kind of listening in to see what you guys are doing in the region. Very exciting. Thanks.
Okay, great. Francis, sorry. Oh, Francis, sorry. You're their interpreter, right? Vanessa.
Sorry, I'm a bit under the weather, COVID maybe. My name is Vanessa and I am the communications director at the Raritan Bay Area YMCA.
Is there a specific, municipality or area that you're most interested in?
Just Perth Amboy, just the general area.
Okay. And Laura, sorry, I should have asked you too. Is there a specific neighborhood that you're most interested in or municipality?
Nope, the whole region.
The whole region. Okay. And Heather, where are you from and what are you most interested in focusing on?
Hi, I'm Heather Lockhart. I'm the disaster program manager covering Middlesex County from the American Red Cross. So I'm interested in countywide. We saw a lot during Ida in a lot of different areas. So yeah.
Okay, great. And a few other people here from the Arcadis team, Heather and Vishal, do you want to introduce yourselves too? And Megan is also in this room.
Sure, I'll go first. This is Vishal Shah, project controller for the Arcadis Resilient New Jersey team, and happy to see everybody here.
Hi everyone, I'm Heather Sprague. I'm also on the Resilient New Jersey team at Arcadis working on the risk assessment. So excited to hear what everybody's thoughts are on as it impacts our assessment.
Hi, I'm Megan Bushlow, helping out with the Zoom controls today. Happy to see everyone here. And if you have any technical difficulties, you can feel free to chat me directly through the Zoom chat.
All right, well, great. Anyone else that I missed when we were going through? Okay. Well, so like we covered in the intro presentation, these are the different types of flooding that occurs in the region and that we're focused on through this project. And here we have a map similar to what we were looking at earlier, but this one, covers, overlays these different flooding extents on top of each other. So you can see the lighter blue areas are the areas of the region that are affected by heavy rainfall. And then the lighter.
Mary.
Yeah.
I think you want to move your where you're sharing your screen.
Yeah. Did that not work?
There we go.
Oh, okay. Thanks. So you're seeing the mirror board now?
Yes.
All right, thanks. Still seeing the mirror board? Okay.
Yes.
So this is the map that I was describing. So the darker blue areas are those areas that are impacted by heavy rainfall. And then the lighter area here is looking at the future standy extent. So you can see that, often these coastal areas are also affected by both. But you can see the heavy rainfall impacts a lot of other, more inland areas. And then here's looking at Carteret and Woodbridge along, in Carteret, we see a lot of, and in Woodbridge, a lot of industrial uses, some open space, as well as some utilities that are within the areas at risk here. Also, this area here, this is Nose Creek. This is an area that...
Nose Creek es un área.
Sorry?
Perdón?
Yes?
Sorry, I swapped the interpreters.
Oh. So Nose Creek right here is an inlet that sort of is also like a low-line entry point that allows floodwaters from coastal storms to enter more of the neighborhood in Carteret. This area in Carteret is also low-lying, an area that we see impacted from rain flooding too. Also some industrial uses along the Rahway River in here, and then quite extensively along Woodbridge Creek and the neighborhoods around there. Also the South Branch of the Rahway River, and then this little inlet, it's a little bit harder to see here, Pumpkin Patch Brook. And, in addition to flooding, some of the issues that we've seen here is the, desire for more, it's been sort of already the trend along the Arthur Kill to have some of these industrial uses to transition to open space with some of the new waterfront, or the new, especially the waterfront park in Carteret. And sort of the desire to see more of that, but also recognition of the brownfield and remediation issues. Also desire for clean and accessible waterfront and waterways, and improving transportation and pedestrian connectivity. Some of these areas are served by stops on New Jersey Transit in Woodbridge, but less so in Carteret. And then also people have said before that we're looking for more green and open space, and as the more sort of preservation or having more of a buffer along the waterfront. And also should mention again, also another new waterfront park in Woodbridge over on the Raritan River too, sort of continuation of that trend. So we could start with this area, and then we can go over to make sure to cover Perth Amboy too. I guess, is there anything that kind of like pops out on this map that seems, something that surprises you, or is there an area, that seems like a particular concern that you want us to focus on?
Hey, Mary, it's John Ferguson. Listen, this whole area is really pretty tough. You got the Raritan, you got the Rahway, and they get flooded all the time. And unfortunately, some of the sections that they got to protect are definitely critical infrastructures. So they definitely got to work on that. So the one big thing too is I would love for all our municipalities not to get rid of every blade of grass that they have in their towns. Because if you've actually looked at our county, they're building everywhere. And we really haven't forced them to really think about real stormwater management. So that's really critical in the long run.
Yeah, what sort of more stormwater management do you see, or are there particular areas, or is it really kind of all over?
Just all over.
All over.
I think it's just got to be a whole new thinking, even getting people to just use rain barrels, just every little bit helps, but it's not really driven. There's certain sections that actually do want to do it. We do have, a lot of green infrastructure, our green roofs and rain gardens and rain barrels and all that stuff. So, but unless we really change our attitude to all that stuff, we're still going to be in big trouble.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or agreeing with that from anybody? All right, well, keep thinking. We can go on to Perth Amboy here too. So in Perth Amboy, some similarities to the Woodbridge coast along the Arthur Killer, look at a continuation of those industrial uses and some brownfield sites, also critical assets that are exposed to flooding here. And then further up along and around the Raritan River. And then in South Amboy, we're seeing flooding mostly along the coast. In some areas it go a little bit further inland, and there's some public facilities there. But also, throughout most of these regions, we see a lot of, widespread street flooding. And in Perth Amboy, the added complication of it, it's a combined sewer system. So that means that when there's heavy rain events, it can also cause water quality issues. And then there's also throughout here the New Jersey coastline that goes over the Raritan River. It's actually a bridge that's in the process of being replacing, and sea level rise has taken that into consideration. And some of the things that we've heard, in addition to the flood concerns, desire for more waterfront parks, more green space and clean waterways, and then also, additional resources for businesses and, specific to helping businesses recover from the pandemic as well. So in this area, I know there were some folks that were specifically interested in Perth Amboy. Are there specific areas in Perth Amboy or specific issues in Perth Amboy that we should be sure to know about and address? Was it Laura? Were you from Perth Amboy?
No, I don't actually live in the region.
Oh, okay.
So one of the things that we've noticed over in the Red Cross is that the areas that are prone to flooding, not just in Perth Amboy, but region wide, are often the areas where you have the more vulnerable populations living. So that's a trend that we've definitely picked up on over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and that's definitely true. Definitely it's an issue in Perth Amboy, also in Carteret. All right. So the last area of the region, this covers Old Bridge, Sayreville, and South River. Here, again, we're seeing some industrial issues, some industrial areas along the Raritan riverfront, and also utilities that are impacted. Coastal flooding, and the South River, we see quite a bit of both coastal flooding and heavy rainfall. And that, really sort of, impacts resources on both sides of the river. In South River, this kind of, central area of town. On the Sayreville side, there's also some neighborhoods here and some industrial uses. There's a large residential area here too. And then, we see a lot of flooding extending further inland in so all these other tributaries throughout Old Bridge. A lot of this area is, park space, as you can see here, but it does reach into some streets and areas where there's homes too. And then around the Chesquick State Park, this is an area that you see flooding from both tidal flooding and rain flooding, and also right along the coast here too. And some things that we've heard is really a desire for more vibrant waterfronts, more accessible and destination waterfronts, interested in preserving wetlands, creating open space for flood attenuation, making sure to serve historically underserved populations, relevant to that point. Also sort of focus on downtown areas and beautification, and a desire for increased community involvement in all things. Specific to this region, or anything in general that you all have as specific concerns, specific areas, anything that I mentioned seem like something that we should definitely be prioritizing, or things that seem like a major issue? Other issues to add? What are we missing?
Hey, Mary, just for all our designing for all along they want all these new fancy waterfront stuff. They've actually got to be designed really, really well, because I will tell you from Sandy, our park / Old Bridge Park, that waterfront park, it had $5 million worth of damage with that storm surge, and that wasn't a major, super site. So if you're going to design these things, you got to design them well. You got to really have some seawall, some major catch basins, all those things to protect that stuff, because you don't want to have to rebuild that stuff again. So when you're designing stuff, it's really critical that's designed well to understand we're going to see sea level rise. We're still going to get storms. You're going to get that storm surge that's even higher than what we saw at Sandy. So that design is like really critical.
Yeah, good point. So this new attractive waterfront destinations need to be designed with flooding and climate change in mind.
Yes.
All right, well, I think we covered all of these as we went through. But any other thoughts in terms of, anywhere in the region, areas to prioritize specific assets?
Hey, Mary, since I'm responsible for the whole county and stuff, there's lots of spots that need to get worked on. So just, we got 5 different watersheds to worry about. So, and once again, we're going to have to design stuff that actually makes it the best for the dollars. All these other municipalities want to do things, the one thing with the mitigation plan that we put in is trying to look at, it has a better regional approach. We're going to try to do things versus little silos instead of 25 silos protecting themselves. They got to protect it, regionally. And that this region thing is really important, that everybody understands it.
Yeah, and what do you think is, what makes it so important? Like, what are the benefits of the regional approach in your mind?
I think it is because then you can actually channel all the dollars the right way, because none of these projects.
Access to funding.
Yeah, it's definitely that. And if you can get more to do it, it's just a better cost benefit analysis. That's what you want to say. Spend our dollars wisely to protect as many people as we can.
Yeah.
Is, you know, just one little section's protected, and I could have used the dollar someplace else, you know, so it's really important. So if we look at it as this region is trying to do that with 7 municipalities thinking, I think it's going to be so much smarter.
Yeah. Well, that is the goal.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, maybe we can jump over to the scenarios. If I can figure out how to move over there. So I mentioned those like 6 neighborhoods that we would be focusing in on. Is there a preference for where we go? Should we start with Perth Amboy? The neighborhoods are, do I have a map of the neighborhoods in here? I don't think I do. But so in Carteret, we've got that Nose Creek Inlet area and the downtown area. Pumpkin Patch Brook in Woodbridge. We could look more at South River as it goes through South River and Sayreville. And then the Old Bridge, Lawrence Harbor area right on the coast. Any preferences so far from those? And the others are Perth Amboy, focused around like sort of Washington Park and around the highway, and then South Amboy right along the waterfront.
My favorite one is anything I can protect my office in Sayreville. But what anybody wants to discuss, so it's fine.
Yeah, well, let's go here. I think this will be an interesting one. All right, so just a reminder from the intro presentation. So the first scenario is focusing on protecting critical assets and economic centers. The second scenario is really focusing more on natural systems and nature-based infrastructure. And the third scenario is kind of somewhat of a hybrid, combining elements of the two, but also sort of a focus on transition of different types of economies and more on kind of like smart growth and thinking about how land use and mobility are interconnected. So in South River, for the scenario 1, what we're looking at here is a protection of critical assets by actually trying to block off the South River through a surge barrier. So this would prevent coastal storm surges from impacting the area upland of the surge barrier. And we thought the main street and that bridge could be a place to do that. And then, in addition to that, we could look at, raising a main street itself to make sure that it, provides that comprehensive barrier. And then also sort of more like perimeter coastal protection for those assets that are left outside of it. So, surge barriers can often be like a, divisive issue. So I think if there's ideas here from the group in terms of like pros and cons of this, one thing, the surge barrier wouldn't address the rainfall flooding. That would have to be managed through other types of drainage infrastructure along the river and in the basin. But it would be one way of really kind of like, protecting the areas along the South River, in South River and Sayreville and also in Old Bridge from storm surge, from a storm like Sandy from happening. Any reactions or thoughts on this?
No, it's what they're trying to do for, the Greenbrook flood, project. They're just setting up levees and storm walls and all these other things. But once again, it's really expensive. Okay.
Very expensive.
And people are going to be upset because, homes do get bought, and certain things are going to be left, unprotected, but, that's what they have to do. And they're really not planning to have that whole project done, which started back technically in the 50s. So sometime in 2040. So, you know,
Right, it could take a long time to implement.
long time and getting the right dollars. Because each year, because I'm on the Green Blood Flood Commission, and every year we got to go, you know, prove that we're actually get our dollars from the Army Corps plus the state, you know, so it's all those things. So this, for all the stormwater and things that you'd have to do here, this one's really going to be expensive. So you really got to look at, you know, smart land use, okay, for this whole section. You know, I'd really love to see the streets actually raised, because they're definitely low in those sections. So that's one thing. And I'll tell you, for the fact is that we always worried about that we do protect the pumping station now for the sewage authority, but you know, the water's going someplace else because that's protected.
Right.
It's like, so it's got to be designed, you know, as much protection and, you know, and keeping the costs down. We'll see what happens, but.
Okay. Oh, any other thoughts before we go on to scenario 2?
Nobody else likes to talk, I guess.
Well, I appreciate you, John. All right, and then in the second scenario, we'd be looking here at more of an emphasis on, you know, restoring the riparian zone. This, you know, in order to, like, you know, really sort of reduce flood risk in this area without those, you know, that kind of use of barriers, it would mean, you know, more of like a strategic land acquisition or buyouts for the most vulnerable areas. Some of the areas around here in Sayreville have been bought out previously, so this would be kind of like an extension of that kind of strategy, but extending it into other areas in Sayreville and then also onto the South River side too. So obviously here, I think, you know, one of the, you know, in addition, you know, the surge barrier can take a long time to implement. So can these buyouts, and really do sort of, you know, require the interest and participation of the property owners in the area. So can often in the end sort of result in kind of a patchwork. But it certainly can be effective in terms of reducing flood risk.
Absolutely. But, you know, when they first did it for Sandy, you know, Governor Christie wanted it not to be checkerboarded, and it ended up being checkerboarded all through Sayreville, and it was more consistent in South River. Okay. But, you know, and that's that whole big thing, is the fact is you have like 1 or 2 houses on a street that should have gotten bought out, but now they have to keep all the municipal services there instead of being able to just shut it all down and save money that way. So, you know, right. They have their garbage picked up. They still got to have the streets plowed, you know. So if there's really a smart buyout program, that's the best way to do it. Get people out of harm's way. Once again, most towns don't want to lose their tax base. So you got to plan accordingly, find other spots where they can build smartly, and, you know, and keep going from there. But, you know, all on that waterfront, you know, and on the riverfront there, it's tough.
Yeah, what would make it a smart buyout program, do you think?
Really, that the section that they really need to, that really gets flooded all the time, they will have to get bought out.
Okay.
They really do. And then being able to design and use the right growth materials to make sure that it becomes effective and not patch mealed and all this other stuff. I know Rutgers does a big study on that. Actually, would actually work the best, because they've done that in other counties, especially Monmouth and Ocean.
I agree with that, John. For it to be effective as a space that is resilient and absorbs the impacts of surge and excessive rainfall, those areas oftentimes will benefit from being restored back to a wetland environment, and that oftentimes can be much more effective when those utilities are all removed, all those homes are removed, all that infrastructure is removed, and that space is fully restored. When it's done in a patchwork way, you end up with not as much recharge potential as if it were naturalized. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, and there certainly are, also some examples from, in Woodbridge, where there's also, in addition to the bio program, did, the zoning overlay to kind of, enforce those sort of policies long-term too. And, the sort of adaptation of those biot areas as a more like trail system too. Do you, I know we don't have anyone here from South River or Sayreville, but in your, experience with those communities, has there been interest in these ideas? Do you think this is something that people would be, interested in, or do you think there'd be concerns about this?
The original DA that worked after Sandy was really into buying out as much and setting it up and being able to protect everything. I know Art is technically the OEM coordinator / business administrator. He's got like 9 hats.
Yeah.
So it's hard for him to do all that stuff. But yeah, the less people that you have to rescue, the happier they'll be, and whatever can protect the rest of the municipality is more important to him.
Yeah. So do you think this kind of scenario is more preferred over the first scenario that we talked about?
I think so. All right. Because I just know that the cost is going to be horrendous. So it's like.
I agree that the implementation of this could be much quicker from a policy standpoint, potentially. Granted, you do have the hurdles with Blue Acres, and people fighting to stay. Maybe we need to think about how incentives can be established so that everyone will comply. Because by having full cooperation, you'll get the best results out of the strategy of converting it and restoring it back to wetland or riparian land.
Okay, great. That's helpful. So our third scenario here is really kind of looking at maybe more of a redevelopment kind of scenario. So elevation of these roads like we had in the first one, so that they're not flooding, and also sort of can be that evacuation route too. And then, those areas that are right now at risk of flooding, sort of taking a cue from some of the other redevelopment projects on the coastal side of, elevating the land and having that land available for redevelopment. So the new development would be elevated outside of the floodplain. There are some areas of the, sort of the future mean high water here too that you can see sneaking around. So maybe kind of setting back from those areas, but in areas where you're just dealing with more of like the storm surge flooding, the idea would be having these like raised development areas. Thoughts on this strategy, or
this definitely seems to be the trend right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, right. There's the affordable housing development, just up the road in Sayreville, where they've elevated the site quite significantly. So it'd be kind of continuation of that for sure.
And also still having the environmental options are still becoming more prominent. So it appears they're trying to pursue both, at least in a lot of municipalities. That's kind of what I saw.
Yeah. Do you think in these areas that there's interest in redevelopment?
Listen, everybody wants to move into Middlesex County someplace. So if we can redevelop it,
yeah,
it'll definitely go.
And what about the more like sort of industrial areas in Sayreville? Do you think that like redevelopment with new kinds of industry, there is some, you can actually just see here some of these new like kind of like warehousing distribution that's been built in the area too. In addition to redevelopment of housing, maybe redevelopment with sort of new different types of industry too could be an option.
Absolutely. Well, my town's turning into warehouse central, so it's coming. So
everywhere is, it's the last mile, right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, so now that we've walked through all three, what sort of rises to the top in terms of like where you think we should be focusing in terms of developing this preferred scenario? It sounds like there's a preference for more of like,
actually it comes
areas.
back down to is the towns themselves.
Sorry?
You got to look at what the towns really want to do. Is it that redevelopment, or they just want to stay protected as they are? I think redevelopment's the way most want to go. Okay, just use their land smartly, but all the people need to be protected. The one thing I love is that if you can actually elevate that roadway, I mean, because both those towns really do get stuck there. It just and it just stops. And for you to get around, we've had to send people for rescues and assistance, like, all through the county to get from one side to the other. So that's just really a terrific way to look at it. But once again, the towns have to believe in it. That's what they want to do. And I know what I would prefer, but I don't live there. So it's what the municipalities have to push for.
Sorry, is this strictly just for Sayreville, or is this like for Woodbridge? I live in Woodbridge and I was totally flooded for Ida.
Hi, Angela. Yes. So we're just talking about this area in Sayreville and South River right now, but we can definitely go over to Woodbridge. Do you live in Woodbridge?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, before we go on to anything else anyone wants to say about South River and Sayreville and these options? I know Art's here, so he's going to tell some group about what he thinks about this. So, all right. So, Angela, in Woodbridge, actually, maybe we can start here more at the kind of the regional scale too. So this map here is showing areas that are expected to flood from different types of flooding events throughout Woodbridge. Is there a specific area within Woodbridge that you're most concerned about, or where do you live?
So I live on Barron Avenue, and the creek is exactly on my property. So every time it rains, the hair on my arms and my back is like falls, because it's always overflowing. And so for Ida, mind you, I haven't gotten one penny yet from my insurance companies regarding this. I'm waiting for engineers to come to my house to see how bad my house was injured. I have no basement. My son lost everything. The third time I've had to file a flood complaint, a flood for my insurance. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about all that. That sounds really rough. Can you say what neighborhood you're in again?
I'm sorry, I'm in Barron Avenue in Woodbridge proper.
Okay. Well, we may need to look that up to find out exactly where that is. But I think maybe we can go over. So, Angela, so what we're doing here is we're kind of like zooming into a few specific neighborhoods and talking about like a few different scenarios for how we could address flood risk. And in Woodbridge, we've zoomed into Pumpkin Patch Brook, which I think is not near where you're at, but I think what we're looking at here is sort of, we're focused on this area, but the idea is to get input on strategies that could be applicable elsewhere throughout the region. So this first scenario is looking at sort of along the brook here, sort of more, so there's already some like bank stabilization going on, but some more land acquisition or buyouts to kind of allow more space for flood storage alongside the creek. Also using parking lots and other developments to have more underground storage, as well as within like as a retrofit of some of the public facilities. There's a school in this area. So, but in general, kind of like using public facilities and open land for stormwater storage. So that's one scenario. And then second scenario is really more of a focus on restoring natural systems. So here there would be even, greater emphasis on land acquisition and the need for additional buyouts to really try to, restore the historic creeks floodplain in this area. And then the third scenario here is a little bit of a hybrid, but more sort of a focus on redevelopment and smart growth, or kind of, concentration of new development in areas, the key corridors and transit areas. So in this, we're looking at, raising the road around here, as well as new development that would be at a higher elevation along the road. And then still continuing some of those other strategies from the other scenarios in terms of land acquisition, and using some open space for water storage, and retrofits of public facilities. So really would love to kind of get, everyone's input on kind of like in this area, of these three strategies, which do you prefer, and why, and what do you think we should be pursuing as we, develop a preferred scenario?
Well, I kind of think that purchasing the homes that are close by, within these major flood areas, like mine, for instance, I'm waiting for Blue Acres to kick in, and see how that happens. But I hear that it could be years before anything happens. But I totally agree. A house should not be built right by a few feet off the creek. And I think that, to reserve the land close by to buy these flooding areas is a great idea. But I think also because we have the creeks here, I think these creeks need to be properly maintained. I honestly do not feel that they are. And I think money needs to be funded for this creek to be repaired, and retaining walls need to be made. People pay a lot of money to live here, and because there's a creek here, it needs to be, their properties need to be protected.
I want to also say, I don't know. Okay, I want to also say, I live across the street from Angela, and our biggest problem on the Woodbridge Creek situation is that New Jersey Transit and Amtrak runs parallel behind my house on Barron Avenue, and the water hits that COVID pipe. It is not big enough to handle the flow of water now that you've built up so many structures upstream and there's no more natural floodplain anywhere else. I mean, our houses have been here since the 80s, and 40 years later, we're having a major problem because we can no longer rest assured that the slightest bit of water is not going to flood our basements and create havoc in our lives. There's got to be something that's got to be done to increase the flow of the water. You're not going to get rid of New Woodbridge High School. You're not going to get rid of the library or ShopRite, but you've got to increase where this water can go before it hits New Jersey Transit, because once it hits New Jersey Transit, I flood, she floods, every house along this creek floods, and houses 2 to 3 blocks in both directions flood. So something's got to be done about that, like immediately, because The storms are getting stronger. I've only been here 6 years. The neighbor next door to us has been here for 45 and has had the worst 4 years of his life in this area because of that flooding. So, I mean, something's got to be given. We're paying the price for development upstream, and that's not fair to us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. One thing I wanted to bring up, so Angela, you mentioned sort of like doing more of like a flood wall along the creek, you know, that is something that we looked at and thought about, but that can also, you know, that can cause issues downstream in the, you know, what, as Dory was just saying too. So isn't something that we're looking at very closely at this point, really because of the concern of just sort of, you know, putting off the problem further downriver.
Well, it can't get downriver because of New Jersey Transit. I don't think the house on the other side of New Jersey Transit from me floods as badly as I do, or Angela.
Okay.
Angela gets it first because her house is about 2 feet lower than my house on that bend, and she gets hit first, and then we get hit on the other side of the street. So, and I don't think once you cross, I have not heard about them flooding. They don't even clear out the overbrush and the trees in Woodbridge Creek. And on the other side, there is a large marsh. When you're on the train, you can see it. There's open wetland right there. So it has someplace to go. On this side of the train tracks, there's nothing but houses.
Okay.
And we're the ones that are getting it.
Yeah, we'll look into that area more. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have approximately, I think, 8 houses or 9 houses that have already signed up for Blue Acres.
Okay.
I mean, this area is bad, and I mean, you know, and it hurts me because we're all moving. We all have to move now. I don't have a basement. You know, my son lost everything. Dory's moving. My next door neighbor's already moving. How many times could we get flooded out? I know this is not a venting area, so that's not what I'm trying to do, but
that's okay.
There's severity here, you know, in Woodbridge, and I don't know if the township is doing anything, or I don't know if they understand the severity we go through every time it rains.
Yeah, I don't think they understand the severity of the situation, because this was the worst that has happened. But we have had, Angela and I and the other neighbors have had thunderstorms that have backed up into our basements, maybe only 4 or 5 inches. But I have filed 2 claims. She has filed 3 claims. And on top of all of that, I don't feel comfortable putting this house on the market. I can't go through what I went through September 1st ever again. I lost everything in that basement. I lost antique dressers that have been in my family for 100 years because they were up on blocks and I thought they were safe, but they got flooded out because 4 feet of water is going to destroy everything. And I can't go through another September 1st, but I honestly, with good
Well, I think I beat you. I have 8 feet, remember?
Yes, you did. But I can't go through that. And I honestly, with good conscience, cannot put this house on the market, even if I tell possible buyers that it does have a tendency to flood, because that is unfair to them. That only gives them my problem, and the problem needs to be solved by the township, the county, and the state. And they created it by building upstream. I lived in Bergen County. I saw what happened in Lodi and Hasbrook Heights because Hackensack River was built upon and diverted, and with those of us that live downstream, what paying the price for the new building upstream. So yes, you're saying it creates problems downstream, but in our case, our biggest problem, if you come to my house, I will be glad to take you into my backyard and show you that New Jersey Transit culvert pipe. It is not big enough to handle the flow of water that we get during heavy rains. It
Yeah.
just can't do it. It backs up 3 blocks in 2 directions. It's like hitting a brick wall.
Yeah, well, we'll look into that. And thank you both for joining. I think you might have missed some of the intro presentation too. So, know
Yeah.
that this is that this meeting and this program is something that has been initiated by the state. The county is a partner in this, got some folks from the county in this group too. And we are working with the municipalities too, so including Woodbridge. So this feedback, this information is really, really helpful. And we'll take a look at that New Jersey Transit area. And really the goal for today is to kind of understand, like, what are the different, from these different range of strategies, like what kinds of things do you want to see in these areas? Because our process is, we're developing these 3 scenarios, and then the next step is to identify which scenario is the preferred scenario, and then to develop an action plan around that preferred scenario.
Right.
So I know, it sounds like you're already looking at the Blue Acres project or the program. And, like you said, you don't want this to just become some other homeowner's problem. So, is land acquisition, does that make sense as kind of like a key action to be focusing, in Woodbridge?
I think it would be if other solutions are not available, that's going to guarantee that.
Well,
future
I think
owners-
in my situation, on several occasions, I've gone to the township to make some kind of changes to my house. And I've always been told, no, you can't, because you're going to be building too close to the creek. You're within a certain distance. My problem is, well, then why did you build a house so close to the creek? So definitely, I think my house has to definitely be a land acquisition issue, and I'm hoping Blue Acres is an option for me, or a positive option for me. But definitely, I see a lot of places where land acquisition is definitely needed in order to hold, become a barrier, I guess, if you would, for other houses when it comes time for rainfalls.
Yeah, my house is within 2 feet. One corner of my house is 2 feet from the creek. And
it's very close.
Extremely close. And it's every time it rains, it's terrifying. I mean, I'm up all night watching that creek. And the people who sold me this house must have felt the same way, because they installed a spotlight on that side of the house that they can turn on from their bedroom, so they can get up and look to see if the creek was overflowing. So, I mean, no, this has been a problem. It's not been documented enough before. And I think it's time that we document every incident that it happens to us, and let the state and everybody know that this is a major problem. Angela and I have insurance records to show that the different times it's happened in the past 6 years. And I think it's time that, I don't know how long it's going to take, because I know it takes a long time to do these things. But I want to make sure that the state is very much aware that the small little community of 8 houses here, we need help. And it's not just affecting the 8 houses immediately, it's affecting other houses. My neighbor, 5 houses uphill from me, got affected by Ida in a much smaller degree. And it's rippling out, because every time it happens, it gets worse and worse and worse. So I really do appreciate this, and I will be participating in all future meetings.
Well, great. I look forward to it. Well, great. We're just about at time, but any other thoughts on anything that we talked through today, or things that you guys want to make sure that we take back into our process? As I mentioned, we'll have another community meeting in the spring. We're targeting April, where we'll share with you kind of like where we've landed based off of this discussion. There'll be other smaller group settings, as well as some more coordination with the municipalities and the steering committee to develop the preferred scenario. But we'll be coming back in the spring with that.
Is there a way on your website that we can access this entire meeting, because I know you're recording it.
Yeah.
So that we review what we missed.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it'll be posted on YouTube and we'll put the recording on the website.
Good, excellent, thank you.
And there's also some other things on the website. We've got a survey to, provide information on too. And then, also on our website, that's where you can share more information about future engagement events. You can also sign up for our email list, and we're also on social media to